In the distant outlines of modern civilization, there are places where silence now replaces the sound of human life. Cities that once pulsed with traffic, light, and density now stand frozen under dust and time. From above, they still appear intact. Grids of streets, towers, highways, but on the ground, the absence is absolute. No footsteps echo through the corridors. No voices rise between the buildings. Only wind moves through broken glass and empty apartments. These were megacities, built to contain millions, engineered for expansion without limit. Yet something shifted beneath their foundations. Not an explosion, not a war. Something slower, less visible, and far more irreversible. And as the systems that sustained them began to weaken, the exodus started quietly. At first, no one named it collapse. People simply stopped arriving. Then they stopped staying, until eventually the cities were no longer lived in, only remembered by the structures that refused to fall. Long before abandonment, these megacities represented the peak of human concentration. Vertical skylines stretched upward like artificial mountains, layered with commerce, housing, transportation, and digital infrastructure. Every square meter was optimized for density. Life was compressed into elevators, subways, and interconnected towers. Inhabitants rarely needed to leave their districts. Entire ecosystems of work and consumption existed within walking distance or digital reach. At night, the cities glowed like artificial constellations, visible from aircraft as continuous fields of light. From a distance, they appeared unstoppable, as if growth itself had become permanent law. But beneath this illusion of permanence, the demands of sustaining such scale were increasing silently. Energy consumption rising, infrastructure aging, social pressure accumulating in ways that were not immediately visible. No alarm signaled the imbalance. The system simply required more than it once did, and slowly, without notice, the foundation of stability began to shift. Daily life inside these megacities was defined by rhythm and repetition. Millions moved through identical cycles of transit, labor, and digital interaction. Morning trains arrived with mechanical precision, carrying bodies through tunnels carved deep beneath the surface. Towers filled and emptied according to schedules dictated by economic necessity rather than human preference. Even leisure became structured, screen-based, time-limited, optimized for recovery rather than escape. Markets never closed, and neither did the pressure of productivity. Despite this intensity, the system functioned with remarkable smoothness. People adapted to the density as normality. Children grew up understanding vertical space more than horizontal distance. The city was not just a place, it was the environment itself, complete and enclosing. Yet in such tightly engineered stability, even minor disruptions carried amplified consequences. A delay in transport, a shortage in supply, a malfunction in energy distribution, each event rippled further than intended. Still, life continued, as if continuity alone guaranteed permanence. The earliest warning signs did not arrive as catastrophe. They appeared as small deviations in expectation. Housing vacancies in certain districts began to increase, not dramatically, but persistently. Maintenance cycles stretched longer. Infrastructure repairs became reactive instead of preventive. Some transportation lines reduced frequency during off-peak hours. These changes were often explained individually, never connected as a pattern. At the same time, subtle demographic shifts emerged. Families relocating outward, younger populations delaying entry into the city core, businesses experimenting with decentralization. Data systems recorded these movements, but interpretation lagged behind reality, and no one understood what was forming beneath the surface trend. A slow reversal of concentration, a quiet redistribution of human presence, away from the very structures designed to contain it. The city did not yet feel endangered, but it was already beginning to loosen its hold. As pressure increased, cracks began to appear not in the skyline, but in coordination. Energy grids experienced intermittent strain. Water distribution required rerouting. Public transit systems faced synchronization errors that propagated across networks. Each failure was small enough to be managed, but frequent enough to exhaust response capacity. Administrative systems grew increasingly complex as they attempted to stabilize conditions that were gradually becoming unstable by design. Costs rose, not explosively, but continuously, eroding the efficiency that had once justified the megacity model. Meanwhile, external regions began developing parallel centers of activity, smaller, less dense, but more adaptable. The contrast became visible in economic patterns. investment slowly diversified away from central megastructures. The city remained operational, but its dominance was no longer absolute. And in systems built on scale, the loss of dominance often marks the beginning of irreversible transformation. Then came the point where maintenance could no longer match decay. Not in a single moment but across accumulated failures. Sections of infrastructure were decommissioned rather than repaired. Entire floors of residential towers were sealed due to unsustainable upkeep costs. Certain districts entered partial shutdown, their lighting reduced, their services limited. The soundscape of the city changed, less traffic, fewer crowds, longer silences between mechanical noises. For those still living within its boundaries, the change was disorienting. Familiar routes became incomplete. Previously vibrant intersections grew hollow. The city was not collapsing outwardly, it was retracting inwardly, shedding layers of function. And yet, official narratives still described it as operational, because acknowledging systemic contraction meant confronting the possibility that the structure itself was no longer viable at its original scale. The turning point did not announce itself, it unfolded through absence. A major corporation relocated its central operations, a transportation hub reduced to regional service only, a residential complex closed for indefinite renovation that never resumed. Each event alone was rational, economically justified, technically explained, but together they formed a pattern of withdrawal. The city was no longer expanding, it was being stepped away from. Those who left did not always do so in urgency. Many departed gradually, transferring lives in stages, until physical presence within the megacity became unnecessary. The infrastructure remained intact, but the human density that gave it meaning began to dissolve. And once density falls below a certain threshold, systems designed for saturation begin to lose coherence. The city still functioned, but it no longer felt inevitable, it felt optional. When critical mass was lost, acceleration followed. Services that depended on full capacity became inefficient at reduced scale. Cost per user increased sharply. This triggered further departure. A feedback loop formed, not driven by disaster but by logic. The more people left, the less sustainable remaining became, and the less sustainable it became, the more people left. District by district, the city reclassified its own space, from active zones to transitional zones to inactive zones. Lights were turned off not during emergencies, but permanently. Entire towers entered silence. Nature began to reclaim microspaces, cracks in pavement, rooftops, drainage systems. The megacity did not explode or burn, it simply began to unmake its own necessity, and in that unmaking, it revealed how dependent its existence had always been on continuous human density. For those who remained, reality shifted into a new texture. Living in an oversized structure without its full population created a strange inversion. Abundance of space, shortage of function. Streets that once required navigation now stood empty for entire days. Sounds traveled differently, echoing longer, fading slower. Essential services consolidated into shrinking operational corridors. The psychological weight of emptiness became part of daily life. Movement through abandoned districts felt like crossing thresholds between eras. Yet even then, departure was not immediate for everyone. Some stayed due to inertia, obligation, or absence of alternatives. But each day reinforced the same condition. The city was no longer expanding toward them. It was receding away from them. Eventually, operational integrity collapsed not as a singular failure, but as fragmentation. Communication networks disconnected between sectors. Power systems rerouted unevenly, prioritizing remaining hubs. Transportation became unreliable and then irrelevant. At this stage, governance structures often dissolved into localized management, each district operating independently or ceasing operation entirely. The megacity ceased to exist as a unified system. What remained was a collection of architectural zones, no longer synchronized, and once synchronization is lost at scale, restoration becomes increasingly unlikely, not because structures are destroyed, but because coordination, the invisible backbone of urban existence, has already dissolved. The city still stood physically, but functionally, it had already crossed into abandonment. In the aftermath, time became the dominant force. Without continuous occupation, infrastructure shifted from use to decay. Moisture entered sealed environments. Temperature fluctuations expanded microfractures in concrete and steel. Vegetation spread through transit lines and abandoned plazas. The skyline, once illuminated nightly, now followed natural cycles of light and shadow. Satellite images still captured geometric order, but the meaning behind that order had vanished. And in that transformation, the megacity joined a growing category of human constructs, places too large to disappear quickly yet too empty to remain alive. Generations later, these abandoned megacities stand as spatial contradictions. They were not destroyed by a single force, nor erased by singular catastrophe. They were released from necessity. Their existence depended on continuous human concentration, and when that concentration dispersed, the structures outlived the systems that sustained them. Roads still lead nowhere in particular. Towers still reflect sunlight across empty districts, and silence has become the primary occupant. The collapse was not an event, but a transition, slow, distributed, and almost imperceptible until it was complete. And perhaps the most unsettling detail is not what was lost, but how naturally it occurred once the conditions changed.